Good morning. My name is Karan Singh. I'm one of the student organizers for the Lean Summit. It's a great pleasure to introduce to you Ken Snyder. He's the Executive Dean of the John M. Huntsman School of Business and the Executive Director of the Shingo Institute. Ken joined the John Huntsman School of Business as an Executive Dean in 2008. He has served as a board member of the Shingo Institute since 2009 and was named the chairman of the Board of Advisors and the Executive Director of the Shingo Institute 2015. In this workshop, we'll discuss the history of the Shingo Prize, learn the basics of the Shingo model, and the idle behaviors, among other things. Ken is an experienced professional with an engaging personality. I know I'm excited for this interactive session. I hope you are too. So please join me in welcoming Ken.
Thank you, Ken. All right, so we got a mic? Okay, good. And let's make sure this works. Oh, great. All right, so this is a workshop. That means it's interactive, so feel free to ask questions as we go along. And I'm going to ask you questions. Most of those are not rhetorical questions. They are questions that I'm asking you to respond to. All right, so I'm just warning you up front. I will ask questions. I expect a response. I'm in the US, I'm not in Japan. And we'll talk about that in just a minute, what that means for those who may have spent some time in Japan. All right, I think it's useful to go through a little bit of the history of the Shingo Institute and the Shingo Prize. And so let's start off with that. The Shingo Prize, Utah State University used to sponsor an Operational Excellence Conference. We still do, matter of fact. It's been going since the early 1970s. And we invited, one year we invited Norman Bodek, and many of us in the room know Norman. He's been one of the people who's been very influential in the Lean community for the past several decades. He was a publisher, and he arranged for the translation of many of Shigeo Shingo's books into English and published them and then disseminated them into and helped move the Lean community along in the US and throughout the rest of the world outside of Japan during the 1980s. And this was in the later 1980s. Norman came to speak at our conference and met with my predecessor, a fellow by the name of Vern Buehler. And over dinner one night, they were talking about how can we get the Lean movement going in the US. Lean, the word had never been used before. It came a few years later. So how can we get this whole idea of operational excellence and the things around the Toyota production system, how can we disseminate that to the rest of the world? And they thought about the idea of coming up with a prize. And so as they were talking about it, Norman suggested that he could ask, since he'd worked closely with Shingo, he suggested that we could get Shingo Sensei's permission to use his name for the prize. Norman arranged that. Vern, out of respect for Shingo Sensei, arranged to get an honorary doctorate for Dr. Shingo, so it's appropriate to call him Dr. Shingo. There's a picture of him on the day that he came to Utah State University to get his honorary doctorate, and he gave us permission to use his name for the Shingo Prize. So in 1989, we launched the prize. The first winner that year, and unfortunately they didn't keep very many records and no photographic records or anything else, so we have no history other than just a prize was awarded to Globe Metallurgical. And then we decided after that we were going to start keeping it a little bit more universal. But I thought at the same time, when Dr. Shingo was in the United States, he actually appeared on national television one time. And we have a little clip of that just so you can get a flavor for what he was like and what his personality was like. So could we start the video? Oh, no sound. He's telling the banana story. Oh, there we go.
バナナの全体の重さで金を要求します。しかしこのバナナはですね、46% は皮の重さです。皆さんたちは金を入れてバナナを買うときになぜ食べれないバナナの皮に対して金を払いますか。アメリカもヨーロッパもですね、そして残念ながら日本もですね、バナナの皮に金を払っています。私はアメリカ、ヨーロッパ、その他の世界の国々にですね、バナナの皮 食べれないということを教えに回っています。
And nobody has solved the banana problem yet. I hate to say that, but that's the banana story that he told on national television. So it gives you a little bit of a flavor for his personality, though. He's always thinking about how do we eliminate waste and what are some of the ways to do that. And his banana story is great. So the next year, the Shingo Prize was awarded to United Electric. And you might recognize some of the people in this, those of you who know Bruce Hamilton or George Konensaker and Ross Robson. Those are some people who are around the table. If you know them, you'll understand. George led the first examination team. Bruce was the plant manager of the plant that won the prize. For those, I see Helen going, yeah, you never knew that. So they've been around a lot longer than I have in this community, and they're still closely affiliated with the Shingo Institute. We came out with a trophy soon thereafter, and here's the design of the first trophy. We also got corporate sponsorships. Ford was nice enough to be our very first corporate sponsor, and we lived off of corporate sponsorships for many years. The first assessment model that was documented came out a few years later. This has been revised many, many, many times, and we continue to improve it so that we can make the assessment for the prize continue to be state-of-the-art. So the bar keeps getting raised year after year, but that's where the bar started. In 1994, President Clinton wrote a letter to us and to all of the Shingo Prize recipients, congratulating them. We thought that was a great honor. And also in 1994, we started our research or publication awards. And the very first one that we came up with was the book, The Machine That Changed the World. That is actually the book that started using the word lean for the first time. I am not a fan of the word lean. I'll just put that right out there. I think it is misused, abused, and misunderstood more often than it is a good description of what we're all about. Unfortunately, it is what it is, and we have to live with it, and so you're all here at a lean conference as a result. So, I live with that. I'm sorry. In 1994, we also got our first non-U.S. recipient, and later, first recipients from Mexico, and I'm just going to go through some of these really quickly. 2000, we got recognized in Businessweek magazine, and we were called the Nobel Prize for Manufacturing, is what it called, the Shingo Prize, which was a great honor. In 2003, we started an affiliation with Dr. Stephen Covey. Many of you know his work, and it dovetails very nicely with the work that we do within the Shingo Institute. In 2004, we started a partnership with the Technical University in Monterey. In 2005, we started a special public sector awards. We have since discontinued those. In 2007, we started what is called the Lean Certification Alliance, and it's a joint effort between us, AME, SME, and ASQ to teach Lean certification courses. So it's the basic tools of Lean, and we all agree on the curriculum of what we think that should be. We have since discontinued teaching those basic courses. Our other three partners continue to teach those, but we continue to put our brand on them and participate in the curriculum development. 2008, and I'll describe this process when I get into the model a little bit more later on, but we came out with our model. It was deliberately patterned after the Toyota house, which many of you are familiar with, I think, but we created our own Shingo house. We've since abandoned the house because of the confusion with Toyota and because we didn't think it graphically represents what we wanted to represent. So I will walk you through the model later, but I just wanted you to know this has been around for about 8 years now. In 2008, we also started our first partnership in Europe, and we had our first prize winner from Central America. What we discovered is, and this 2009 was a big turning point for the Shingo Institute. It's the year that we actually changed the name from the Shingo Prize, which was the name of the organization within the School of Business, to the Shingo Institute. And the reason we made that change is because we changed from being just an assessment and recognition organization to an executive education. We started doing more coursework. We started teaching our courses. We started targeting executives as part of that. Imagine that, a university program that's designed around education. That was kind of our thought process of why haven't we been doing this before? Duh. But there is room for continuous improvement all the time, right? So this was what really drove us into this, was the idea of we need to get out there and start teaching people the principles and being more actively involved in that. So with that, we started developing some educational partners, and our partners started directing the efforts of more people around the world towards the prize. And so we had our first prize winners from the UK. We engaged with Shigeo Shingo's son, Ritsuo Shingo. Many of you have had a chance to meet him. He has been a speaker at our conference every year for the last 7 years. He spent 42 years in Toyota, most of which was spent outside of Japan. So he was in Detroit supporting NUMMI, and we'll talk about NUMMI a little bit later. He then went to Kentucky and was there for several years. He then went to the UK and was there for 7 years. And then he did 2 different startups in China, one building the Toyota minibus in Chengdu, China, and then he went to start up the Hino Motors joint venture in Guangzhou. So altogether he spent 14 years in China. So he has lots of Toyota experience. He thinks he's done more startups within Toyota than any other Toyota person has been involved in. I think he's probably right, but nobody keeps records like that. So at any rate, lots of experience, but most of his experience with Toyota has been outside Japan. It's been wonderful to get him involved with the Institute. He's been a great asset to us, and it's been wonderful to re-engage with the family. Incidentally, Shigeo Shingo's wife and Ritsuo's mother is still alive, still lives in the family home. She's 100 years old. And still pretty, as they say in Japanese, genki, although she has a nurse that comes in and helps her. So it's wonderful to have her engaged as well. And she and her son have been very good to us, so including donating a whole set of first edition books from Dr. Shingo. First edition with his notes in the margins. All the things, so we're now going through that and go, what did he say about that? Or some of it is, next edition I need to do this. And some of it is, when I teach this, I need to make sure I emphasize this. It's fun to read through his margin notes. At any rate, it's been wonderful to get the family involved. All right, in 2010, we started doing steady tours. We do a tour, 1 or 2 tours each year to Japan. We also occasionally do tours for corporations when they ask us to. We also do tours in Europe, Mexico, and the United States, particularly focusing on Shingo Prize winning award companies as our Gemba visits. We had our first recipient from Asia in 2010, a second recipient from Asia, and our first from China in 2011. Our first recipient from Scandinavia also in 2011, and our first healthcare recipient in 2011. And then 2011 also South America. As you can tell, there's a trend here. 2011 was the first year we got more applications for the Shingo Prize from outside of the United States than from inside the United States. That trend has continued, and last year over 70% of our applications came from outside of the United States. It truly has become an international movement, and the Shingo Institute has been part of that internationalization. We also now have almost half of our applications are non-manufacturing. So we come from a manufacturing base, but we now have people who are from healthcare, from the financial services industry, from education, and so on. We have a lot of different people who are applying the principles of operational excellence in their own setting and having great success. And I know some of you here are from healthcare institutions. Do we have any others that are non-manufacturing? I know we have one restaurateur. Yes, he's raising his hand. What other industries do we have here? I saw a few hands. Education? Yes. Higher ed? Okay, and IT support services then. And okay, so I'm in an educational institution, and I'm responsible for delivering education. And we can have a great discussion about applying lean principles in an educational setting, because I think there's a lot that can be done there, and we actually think we've done a lot, but there's still so much left to do. So that's a fun discussion. I'm not going to go into that too much today, though, because I want to give you a little more background and have something that applies maybe perhaps better to your environment. First Irish recipient. We've had actually, in terms of country applicants, we have more from Ireland now than we do from the United States. That's a strange aberration. I mentioned financial services, and in 2013 we came out with our new trophies. And I mentioned that we switched to an executive education model and started developing courses. We were teaching the courses and flying all over the world doing that. And it just became too much. There was too much demand for us to be able to meet. So we started creating teaching partners that then eventually evolved into, wait a minute, we've got to rethink this because there's no way for us to be able to deliver this. We're busy enough just training the trainers and training the examiners. So we decided to stop doing any kind of training ourselves, other than training the trainers and training, or what you call them, facilitators, training the facilitators and training the examiners that go out on our site examination visits. And we turned all of the public training over to our group of affiliates. We now have 12 affiliates. They're in different industries. They service different industries. They're in significantly different geographies all over the world. And our goal right now is to continue to expand our affiliate network so that we can get our message out and have it touch as many people as possible. We have 5 different courses that we teach. You can see those on our website. But these are our partners. And what we get out of them is they pay us a license fee to use our curriculum, but they're the ones who teach our courses now. So, and I can put, you'll notice in the online version that you'll get access to of my presentation, one of those will be missing. It's because of an agreement that we can't print or put on a website their logo. So they'll be off of it. So on the PowerPoint presentation you access after the conference, there'll only be 11 and not 12. Okay? In 2015, in our effort to continue to be the thought leader in this space, we hired a director of research, Dr. Rick Edgman. We also started doing conferences in other places outside of the United States. And so last year we started a conference in Ireland and one in Mexico. Next year we plan to have one in China. So we'll have 3, these are annual conferences. So we'll have 3 outside the US plus 1 inside the United States. And we also launched the Shingo MBA. We took the coursework that we've developed for executives and rolled it into a top-notch MBA program that we also have built into each of the courses, and I'll just use accounting as an example. But in the accounting course, we have a lean accounting module in the accounting course. In the marketing course, we have a lean marketing module in the marketing course, and so on. So it's how do you think, as a lean leader, how do you think about marketing? How do you think about accounting? It's not just teaching the tools of it, but it's also training them in the different disciplines to as much as you can within an MBA course. So we launched that this past year, and we right now the first cohort is underway in Utah where we exist, but we're planning on launching one on the East Coast. We had more demand for the program on the East Coast, lots of inquiries, but not too many people want to fly out to Utah for some reason. I don't understand why. So we're going to launch one hopefully in the Washington, D.C. area later this year. We had a lot of demand from the East Coast, so that's a great development. So there's kind of a brief history of the Shingo Institute and the Shingo Prize. It's kind of a break point. Any questions? Not launching one here per se. So we had about 70% of the inquiries we had were East Coast of the U.S. and other close areas. Not as much interest from California, although there's some pockets of interest, but not enough to really say, oh yeah, we can get enough students to do it and make it work. Hate to say that, but it is what it is. Yes?
We have a Shingo recipient in Ventura County, and I understand that we can take factory tours.
Yes.
How does one set that up?
Okay, so you can contact them directly, or you can go through our office and have it set up. One of the things we require of all Shingo Prize recipients is that they open up their facility for tours. And sometimes it becomes rather burdensome, and so they may put some constraints on when and how long and things like that. But that is a requirement of them applying for the prize, is that they basically sign away the... And then what we found is some of them start charging money for it afterwards. But there's a period of time when they don't charge money too. But maybe you're going to get caught in that too. I don't know who you're talking about, but some of them charge and some of them don't. We appreciate those that don't. There's one of them that their charge of entry for their plant tour is you cannot leave until you give them one good idea to improve themselves, okay? So their price of entry isn't monetary, but you have to bring your head and mind and be engaged. I like that one, incidentally. That's why I mentioned it. All right, so let's talk about the model. And the model, we've had a different model over time, and we continuously improve it, try to get, raise the bar, as I mentioned before. But we found with the Shingo Prize winners, there were two different types of Shingo Prize winners. They would improve their results to a certain point, they'd apply for the prize, they'd win the prize, and then they'd go one of two directions. And about half of them would keep improving, and about half of them would hit a pinnacle and then plummet after they won the prize. And who was it last night? I was talking to somebody about that last night, and they go, oh yeah, the Shingo Prize effect. Meaning they've been around long enough to know that this was going on and say, yeah, so, that was you? Was that you, Sam? Okay, so we noticed it too. And it's sad, and people were complaining to us about it that, okay, they were a Shingo Prize winner, but you got to go look at them now because they really suck. And this is not the kind of reputation we wanted to have. We wanted to maintain the integrity of the prize. And so we put a lot of effort into studying what was going on. Why were some of them, half of them, continuing to improve and half of them failing afterwards? And this is a problem. Why wasn't this not sustainable? What's the difference between those that were continuously improving and those that weren't? And what we found was, I'm going to do it in terms of the way we do assessments. So, prior to doing this research, the way we did assessments was based upon, were they using lean systems? Were they using lean tools? And were they getting good results? That's all we looked at. Those three key criteria. What's missing? What? Well, leadership is part of it. Culture, that's the word we use, which is fine. It all ties together. So I'm not saying you're wrong at all. You're not wrong. You're absolutely right. The missing component in this model is culture. And if they don't have a culture of continuous improvement, it doesn't matter whether they have the right systems and tools and they were getting good results temporarily. What's missing is they weren't creating a culture for keeping it going. And therefore, it was unsustainable and they would fail. And so we talked about, what is culture? How do you define culture? And what there's a good quote about it. What is our responsibility as leaders? This dovetails really nicely. I was mentioning this to Sam between the break. This dovetails very nicely into what Sam was talking about this morning. It's leaders' job to create that culture. How do you do that? How do you define it? So, let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about a couple of different kinds of culture. I'm just going to pick one of those right there, firefighting. If you have a culture of firefighting within your organization, what kind of culture do you have? It's reactionary. What else? Problems never leave because you celebrate those problems, right? You celebrate somebody standing up and putting out the fire and you go, yay, that's our hero. And what do you do to that person? You reward them, right? And then you promote them and they become the boss. So you got the best firefighter out there being the boss, right? Is this error proofing? Is this solving quality at the source? No, you're rewarding the wrong kinds of behavior. And do you create a culture of continuous improvement by firefighting? No, you create a culture of putting out fires better and better. You don't prevent the fires. Is it better to put out fires or to prevent fires? It is better to prevent fires. So firefighting culture is basically wrong. It's a waste. You're creating problems that don't need to be there. It's a waste. So if we all agree that firefighting is not the kind of culture you want to have, what is the kind of culture you want to have? And I would suggest a culture based upon respect, empowerment, trust the people in your organization, and so on. We'll talk a little bit about more what that means, but let's just tackle trust for a minute. There's a great book by Stephen Covey's son, Stephen M.R. Covey, and he's going to be a keynote speaker at our conference in April. There's a plug. On the speed of trust. I love the title of the book. It gets right to the core of what does a trust culture do. If you trust people to take action, are they able to take action? Do they take action quickly? Typically, yes. And do they take the right action? Typically, yes. And your organization can become a high-performance organization because you trust your people. And so there is a speed about trust. If you trust them to ensure quality at the source, do they take responsibility for the quality and not pass bad product down the line? And this works in a hospital too. I'm using a metaphor for manufacturing, but the same idea. If you solve the problem at the source, you don't have problems down the line that create more and more a cascading effect of waste. And so a culture of trust is much more efficient than a culture of firefighting. So just to use those as examples for us to understand the concept of how does culture make a difference. Okay. We discovered 3 key insights from our research. Number 1, ideal results require ideal behavior. In other words, behavior creates the culture. It's not what you say, it's what you do. So we create a culture by how we behave. As leaders, we set an example. I love the way Ditso Shingo says it. He says, show them your back. Don't ask people to do something you're not willing to do yourself. Show them your back. But it's the way in typical American culture we would say, lead by example. And this ties really well with what Sam was talking about earlier. Ideal results require ideal behavior. Second insight, systems drive ideal behavior. We as leaders are responsible for designing systems that result in ideal behavior. I went through a little exercise with Eric last night. We both are employees of universities. Universities are fraught with bureaucracy and really stupid systems. Okay? I'm just going to put that out there. I know we're guilty. I found out Cal Poly's performance evaluation system is essentially identical to the one we use at Utah State University. Okay? I'm just going to tell you the features of this. Once a year, every faculty member has to sit down with their department head for their annual performance review. The performance review is done on 3 things, 3 areas. It's true for every faculty member of every university I've ever talked to in any country in the world. You're judged on your research, your teaching, and what they call service, which is everything else you might ever do. And they rank the importance of each of those. So if you're primarily a research faculty member, they may give you a 50% weight on your research. And they may give you a 40% weight on your teaching. The 2 of those always add up to 80 to 90% unless you're in an admin position like I am. And then the service is like 10%. That means you got to go do something. But you got to do research and teaching. Now, so once a year you sit down. You get some general feedback. Incidentally, there is no really good way of measuring teaching. Student popularity contests, we give a survey to students and it's really, how nice were you to me and did you give me a good grade? And were you entertaining in front of the class? There's no way that students know whether or not they have been prepared to go get a job. I hate to say that. That's not part of the criteria you're judged on when you're teaching. It should be. On your research, it's not whether or not your research has an impact in the profession. It's only, did you get it placed in a top journal or not? Okay, so misguided objectives. They're not aligned with the purpose of the institution at all. You do it once a year. What else did we decide is all wrong with it, Eric? Service is kind of a leftover, whatever you want to call it. Oh yeah, so the teaching, you'd think that you could have at least some good feedback from your colleagues, or at least a group of people who know how to teach well, to come in and kind of coach you on how to get better and go through training, but you're not required to do that at all. And matter of fact, in our institution, not so different from what Eric tells me happens here, we don't usually do it. Usually it's just the department head will go in once a year. Eric says that and this is similar in our case, once you get tenure, they don't have to go in at all because what are you going to do about it? You can't fire them anyway, even if they're teaching poorly. It's a sad and pathetic system. And so let's talk about ideal behaviors. If you have and I'm going to put it in your organizations, I can tell you what I would change about our university performance evaluation system if given the opportunity to do so, which I never will be. But in your institution, how could you use performance evaluation system to drive ideal behaviors? Let's take a second and talk about what are ideal outcomes and ideal behaviors that you want from a performance evaluation system. This is a time for you to raise your hand and suggest something. What?
Growing others.
Yes, you want to develop others. So is this system going to develop them for their careers, make them better and better? Okay, that assumes a few things. Let's talk about what it assumes. What does it assume?
It assumes that you have developed leaders to begin with.
Yeah, you've got good raw material coming in the door. So you've got, if you're talking faculty, that you're hiring the right kind of faculty. Right. Okay, so that requires, whether or not it's right or not, depends upon a clarity of purpose. Right? You've got to decide, what is it we're all about, and are we getting people who can help us accomplish that? Incidentally, that's not a question ever asked within. When we hire faculty in universities, normally it is, who's the best researcher we can get for the amount of money we have in the budget? Has nothing to do with preparing students for getting jobs, for example, which I think would be the highest purpose of particularly a business school, but shame on me for even thinking that. Yes?
Shouldn't be easily gameable.
Not gameable. Okay, and the way that...
Not easily.
Not easily gameable. So what I think you're saying is you want to have feedback that is consistent with the purpose. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't publish in lousy papers to get publication, in sham publications.
Well, you can, but that would never happen. That thought would never occur to an academic.
If that's actually a useful criteria for
Right.
giving feedback.
Okay, so
And feedback more often, once a year is like,
So let me switch it back to you guys, though. How would you build a performance evaluation system in your organization if you wanted to get ideal behaviors? Forget about the university setting. Let's go to your setting. And I assume you're either running a restaurant, right? Or you're in an educational setting, but in a staff support position, so it's a little bit different than my role in an educational institution. Or you're in a manufacturing environment, or you're in a hospital, or you're in a financial services company. How would you build a performance evaluation system that drives ideal behaviors?
By having it on a weekly, monthly basis so that you're constantly feeding back.
Timely. Once a year? Come on. You're going to criticize me for the ratings the students gave me a year ago last spring? Yeah, and that's the way it works now in a university setting. So you're talking every week. Or it could be daily if you're having interactions every day. Or you could be on a project basis for certain things. And when somebody finishes a project, isn't that the best time to give them feedback? Is right then and there? Isn't that what the Gemba tells us to do? That we go and observe what's going on right then and there, and we take action at the time that something's taking place. That's timeliness. There's a timeliness factor that's got to be involved in this. Okay, great point. Yes, in the back there.
Well, I was just going to say a common understanding of whatever competency that you're trying to measure. So if your communication,
Right.
my understanding of communication
Some
is the
clear,
same as
measurable goals. And I like the SMART goals. Many of you are familiar with SMART goals, that they're measurable, they're specific. So the better you can clarify, here is what your job is, or let me put it in lean terms, here is what your standard work is. How are you performing against that standard work? And then you can say, okay, you're doing a great job, or you're doing this and more, or you're doing this, but except for this one needs a little bit of help. And you do that on a timely basis, you can really help somebody understand their responsibilities and grow within their environment, right? Okay, what else? Yes?
Objective, based on metrics.
Yes.
So that it's non-discriminatory in your
And-
rewarding the behavior rather than subjective. Well, I think you're doing a good job.
Right, and so there's two things he said there. One is it's measurable. So you've got to have something where you can measure people, but some things can't be measured, and other than observation, and that's behavior. And so it always helps in a performance evaluation to say, this is what the ideal looks like, and here's the behavior I observed. Can you, there's a gap analysis, and what I want you to do as you work to improve your leadership ability is close that gap. Do you get that kind of performance feedback from your system now? No, none of us do. It's so rare in American society, it's pitiful. It really is. Are we giving that, but is it that hard to design a system that drives ideal behaviors? No. You could do it on you set criteria for what timeliness means, and you make sure that your leaders, your lean leaders that Sam was talking to earlier today, are giving that kind of feedback on a regular basis. They're very specific, they're project-oriented or they're purpose-oriented, and they're measurable, and you could build a performance evaluation system that drives ideal behaviors. And right now, most of us work in organizations where it's just a waste of time. Filling out the forms is a waste of time, sitting down with people is a waste of time. The feedback we give them is a waste of purpose and a waste of time. We're not giving it on a timely basis. We're not doing it on a measurable basis. We're not doing it in alignment with the purpose that we have for our organization. And shame on us as leaders for allowing that to happen. I'd change it in my organization if I could. I do change it in the Shingo Institute. I give timely feedback, at least I try to. I give specific feedback. We have measurable goals and so on. So even if your big organization can't do it, you can try to do that within your own organization. Yes, Becky.
One of the things that I have, thank you. One of the things that I have faced with was that the employees that I have, they require the tools in order to provide the result that you need. In order to have a cultural behavior that you are expecting, I believe you need to have a good training and provide them with the tools, and then you can ask them.
Right. Can you really evaluate somebody's performance when you haven't even taught them how to do the job?
Exactly.
Whose fault is that?
That's our fault.
That's our fault. Exactly. Okay. Third insight. Principles inform ideal behavior. So how do you know what's ideal behavior and what is not ideal behavior? Turn to the principle behind it. And as we discovered this, we went back to, we created some ideal behaviors around principles, but we went back to something that Shigeo Shingo said. He said, think in terms of dimensions. And one of the things that I find fascinating about reading Shingo's books is every section of virtually every book is about a system or a tool. But he will start the section off with a brief introduction around a purpose. So some of you will know that he's the one who created the terminology in Japanese called shinguru dandori, or what is translated in English as SMED, single minute exchange of dai. Okay? And what that means is taking waste out of the product, out of the process. Don't do things that are part of the value stream that don't belong in the value stream. Take it out and do it outside of the process so that you can keep the value stream as waste-free as possible. And that principle applies across, not just in manufacturing, but across everything that you can think of. There's a lot of SMED thinking that needs to be applied to the delivery of products, for example, in a supply chain as you supply product to somebody else. So, what's the principle behind that? If you look into what Shingo said, he'll say, in order to keep a smooth flow in the process, you can apply SMED. And then he'll go through the SMED tool, and how do you think about the SMED tool or the SMED system, and how do you take that waste out of there. But if you go back, he always starts with the principle, but it's always just a little brief comment about the principle. It's a short little thing about, in order to keep a smooth flow in the process. And he'll say the same thing about Jidoka, or the same thing about the Kanban system, or whatever. In order to create a smooth flow in the process. So the idea is eliminating the wasteful steps of time in a process by removing unnecessary steps to create a good flow. So we create, and so he also talked, and says it's best to think in terms of dimensions or categories, another way to translate that word. So what we've done is we took the principles we identified and we put them into different dimensions so to make it easier for us to understand and think about them. And with that, I'd like to start going through some of those key principles. We have our Shingo model book. I brought a bunch of copies. I have some more in the back if this isn't sufficient. You're welcome to take one. It's also downloadable from our website. So you'll be able to go through a lot of what I'm going to go through today by going through the book as a review or going to our website as a review. But let me just talk about some of these and what they mean. We start with what we call cultural enablers. This is the foundation of building the right culture. And what is culture again? Do you remember what we talked about a minute ago? It's a reflection of the behaviors. And if your behaviors are ideal, you're going to build a great, sustainable culture. How do you do that? With systems and with setting the right kind of guiding principle to inform those systems. And so now we're going back a step to what are the right principles to guide what is ideal behavior. So we've picked out two that fit this particular aspect. One is respect every individual. What does that mean? How do you show respect? What are some examples of some ideal behaviors that show respect? Empowering them. But is it just empowering them? No, it isn't. So we didn't use empower when we did this. But empowerment is a big part of it. What else could be included in respect every individual? Listening, yes, and that can be tacit or it can be something that is systematized. Some of the best listening we do as leaders is we create a system for them to be able to give suggestions on continuous improvement. So the Shingo Prize winning companies that we see are ones that have a wonderful system of engaging and empowering their employees by giving them a way to make suggestions, whether it be a quality suggestion or a productivity suggestion or a features of the product suggestion or whatever it may be, and we listen to them by recording it, by implementing it, acting on it, giving them feedback so they can see what the status of their idea is at any given time, by letting them know how much money they saved the company by implementing their idea, and so on. Those are ways we can actively listen to them by having a great system in place of listening. Okay? What else? Where does safety fit?
How about respecting, don't waste their time?
Don't waste their time. Yes. Yeah. Don't waste their time. Where does safety fit? Yeah, if you're working for an organization and you feel unsafe, what good are you going to be able to concentrate on anything else? I'm worried about getting burned every day, or I'm worried about getting my hand sliced off. I'm using examples from Alcoa. Some of you may know Alcoa's story, but when Paul O'Neill became the chairman of Alcoa, he put safety first. He literally put safety first. And here's people working in their plants who are dealing with metals that are thousands of degrees hot, and working with aluminum, which is one of the sharpest and most conducive to cuts. Do you realize that you are much safer in an Alcoa plant than you are in a hospital in the United States? It's sad but true, but they really do mean it when they say safety first, and they really act on it. And people there actually feel really safe. You go talk to them and they'll say, yes, they really do respect me as an individual because they have created a tremendously safe work environment. Despite the metals that we work with and despite the temperatures that we work with, we are safe. But if you don't create that kind of, and that can be a psychological safety too. So if I'm worried about being abused in some way in the workplace, are you going to be able to be engaged and empowered? And the answer is no. You have to have a safe work environment. So those are some different systems, if you will, or ways that we can show respect for every individual. Let me take a minute and talk about lead with humility. It is the most misunderstood of all of the principles that we work with. And we worked with a lot of different ways of trying to express it, and eventually settled on this one with the caveat that we needed to have an explanation go along with it. And really what it is goes back to Sam, what you said, you listen. You become a servant leader. Your job is to help the people who are doing the actual work, not to necessarily command them. It's not a command and control system. It's a listen to them, help them do their job, clarify what their job is, but then help them be effective in doing it. That is leading with humility. My job here is to help you. If I'm not helping you, then I'm not doing my job. I am not leading with humility. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? All right. The next area is what I will call continuous improvement for purposes of the model. And this is, I spent a number of years in Japan, and I take groups of students a couple of times a year to Japan. And you never hear the word lean in Japan. I've never heard it once, other than people talking about how it's used in the U.S. So it's always included as a reference to outside of Japan. Inside Japan, they look at this whole thing as Kaizen. And Kaizen is translated, and I hate to say it, there really isn't a much better translation for it than continuous improvement. The characters mean change for good. So you're changing for good, but it's a constant part of everything. And there is a great video, can we launch that right now? From Imai Sensei, who started the Kaizen Institute and wrote the first book back in the 1980s with the title Kaizen in it. Maybe some of you have read it, but he does a really good definition of what, to me, Kaizen or continuous improvement really means, not the way we tend to use it within our environment. And I want you to kind of expand your thought process here a little bit by watching this. I think you can just click on it, can't you? Oh. Well, let's give it a shot anyway. He's just standing at a blackboard and he writes the characters. But his explanation is as good as any I've ever heard. So let's see if we can get the audio, then I think we'll be okay. That's a good start. We're not getting the audio.
Today,
there
I'm going to talk about
Excellent.
Kaizen. And Kaizen is a Japanese word which means continual improvement. And we use these Chinese characters. This means Kai, and Kai means change. And Zen means, for the better. So together, Kaizen means continual improvement. At least, it has been common interpretation of the meaning of Kaizen as the continual improvement. But I'm beginning to feel that continual improvement is not a good enough translation, because it does not carry forward this tremendous self-discipline and the commitment that everybody has when doing Kaizen. So I now have a new interpretation of the word Kaizen. So I say Kaizen is everyday improvement, everybody improvement, and everywhere improvement. For instance, in some companies, people may have conducted some improvement project, such as Six Sigma, and they have completed some projects 3 months ago, and they are now taking it easy. And they think maybe in 3 months from now, we are going to work on something new. But that is not everyday improvement. Well, if Kaizen is everyday improvement, as soon as you completed one project yesterday, you should be starting to do something today. And so every day is a challenge to find the better way of doing the things. So it gives a tremendous self-discipline and commitment. And so that is everyday improvement. And everybody improvement or everyone improvement means that normally many managers think that Kaizen is for those guys on the shop floors. Those are the guys that have to work on Kaizen. But that is the biggest mistake. Kaizen should start from the top. It should start from managers. And managers have to show its commitment, its determination, its guidance, so that everybody will be working on Kaizen. And for that matter, the top management of the company has the most important role in implementing this Kaizen approach. And then every manager. Then it goes down to rank and file employees. If you're employing some part-time people, they should also be involved. That is meaning of everyone. And thirdly, I say Kaizen is everywhere improvement. Many people think that Kaizen is on the shop floor, on the manufacturing environment. But Kaizen is everywhere. For instance, in the offices, in the admin offices, or where the technical people are developing a new process, new product, or this sales and marketing people talking to the customers. The Kaizen is everywhere. It's not limited to the shop floor. So Kaizen should be introduced as a company-wide program. So for all those reasons, I would say Kaizen is not simply a continual improvement, but it is everyday improvement, everybody improvement, and everywhere improvement. It's a tremendous, grand scale of company-wide improvement project.
Don't you like that? Kind of a simple way, but all expansive and comprehensive. I appreciate that. Let's see if we can get this back. Now my thing's not working, Tim. Aha, okay. So, with that idea in mind of everybody, every day, everywhere, let's think about some of the principles around improvement and what kind of improvements we want. And we've broken it out into different, if you read Jeff Leiker's Toyota Way, we did it a little bit differently than he did. We tried to keep true to what Shingo said, but it's still essentially the same sort of principle. There's seek perfection. Incidentally, I have a minority report on this one. I do not like this, I'll be honest with you. I got outvoted. Seek means ye shall find. Isn't that something, Sam? And seek and ye shall find. And seek to me implies that you will find. And to me, it's always been a journey. And you're never quite there because you can always get better, no matter what. There's still something left to improve. I can be, and I don't like perfection either. So I like the pursuit of excellence as opposed to seeking perfection, but I hope you get the idea. Perfection, I can pay my taxes perfectly. I can be perfectly honest and forthright and be perfect in paying my taxes. That's not the idea behind this. I want to get better at doing something. So if it comes to taxes, can I get more efficient in doing it so it doesn't take me weeks and weeks? Maybe next year it'll only take me a week, and after that maybe only 4 days or something like that. I can get better at doing my taxes, but I'm not going to get more perfect at doing my taxes. And perfection implies you can do something perfectly, and I think you can still get better. So I like pursue excellence, but I got outvoted. Minority report. Embrace scientific thinking. This goes to the core of standard work because you cannot test new ideas and your people cannot test new ideas unless they know what the basis is. They have to have standard work to compare it to. In the scientific world, they call it the control. Standard work is the control. But once you have standard work and a consistent way of doing things, you can test all you want and see if something's better. So you embrace scientific thinking by test, get better by testing different things and seeing if it works, right? Sometimes it gets out of control. I think I've talked to several Toyota people and they indicate that the recall problems they had a few years ago were primarily caused by getting some tests that people were doing a little bit out of control. And that can be a problem if it involves the safety of an automobile, which ended up with recalls. So you need to control how much that happens and how far it leaks to the customer. But at the same time, if you have standard work, you can do that. You can control the effectiveness of the scientific experimentation that goes on. Focus on process. Too often, and I say this is an American disease, but I see the same thing happening in other places as well. Too often, when something goes wrong, we blame the individual. It's your fault. You know better than that. Usually, now, there may be some people that don't fit, I'll admit that, and I've had some of those myself in my organizations. But usually the problem that somebody has when they make a mistake is not that they're not trying to do it right. They are trying to do it right. We've just made it so hard for them to do it right by the process and how the process is designed that they're going to make mistakes too often because the process sucks. And we've got to fix the process. We've got to error-proof the process before we can hold them responsible. And usually that's our fault, not theirs. And we deflect the blame to them to protect ourselves. We're not humble about, oh, that's a poorly designed process, we need to fix it. Or we're not empowering them enough, we're not respecting them enough to say, you know, there's a problem that we're creating here. Can you figure out a way to error-proof this so it doesn't happen again? Then you show respect for the individual and you fix the process and your quality gets better. So that's what we mean when we say focus on process. Assure quality at the source. This is a critical part. And this is, if you go back to Shingo's early writings, this is where he started. He started with quality. Deming started with quality. So much of what happens in our community starts with quality. What does quality mean? What is quality? There's philosophical debates about this, incidentally. If you read academic journals, they talk about it all the time. At least they used to. It's kind of got out of that. But what is quality? Anybody want to take a stab at it?
Meeting the requirement.
Okay, first and foremost, meeting the requirement and not having a product that doesn't meet the requirement. Okay, but is that enough? That's kind of a necessary but not sufficient. Yeah. Yeah. So are you making them, so that's why I say necessary but not sufficient. Are you making them happy? Are you creating value for them? And sometimes giving them, something they're not expecting is a symbol of quality. So when we say assure quality at the source, we're of course saying don't pass a defect on. You stop and fix it right then and there. But it's also thinking about how do we make this better? How do we surprise our customers with something that's over and above what they're expecting so they have this image of, you create this image of quality. All right, and I talked a little bit before about flow and pull value, but that is how can we create value for the customer? And the customer is who? In a production process, who's the customer? The next person on the line. Because if you pass them a bad product, what do they have to do about it? They have to fix it. Or take it back to you and tell you, hey, jerk, you should have fixed it before you handed it to me. And that's a waste of both your times, not just your time, right? So you're eventually going to have to fix it anyway. And this is the whole idea behind the Andon cord that people have to pull and so on. So we fix it at the source. We assure quality at the source. And we do that by controlling the flow of product. Incidentally, in the Toyota system, they mix those two together. They have a concept they call Gendyu Kandi, which means literally means control the flow. But that's what they use when they say you've got to assure quality at the source. So to them, flow and quality go together. You pull the cord so you can fix the quality at the source, and you stop the flow for a period of time so that the flow of good product will continue after you've fixed it. And they don't separate those two concepts out. We couldn't figure out how to describe that in English, so we had to do it two different ways. But when I'm in Japan, I'll always mix the two together because they do. All right, next. All right, we did that. Uh-oh. There we go. It came back up. Our next dimension is enterprise alignment. Two key things here. One is think systemically, and I'm not saying think in terms of systems, but think of your whole organization as one big system that has one big purpose, and sometimes you do something here that is good for this, and that affects something over here. And you haven't thought about the impact of this systemically. Think of the big picture and how this can affect that. And so one of the things you have to do is think systemically. One of the things as an examiner, I've been out on several examination visits and visited top-notch companies. But one of the most common problems I see is they have no way of systematically thinking about what they're doing. And so you see a group of people off doing a Kaizen project over here that has no relationship to their overall purpose. And so you ask these people, why are you doing that? And they go, oh, because we can improve the productivity here. Well, what will happen if you improve the productivity here? Well, we'll have better results. We'll save money. Well, will you? Because they're planning to eliminate this whole part of the process over here. So you're straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. And the Titanic is either, and we see that sort of thing a lot when we go on examination visits because nobody is looking at the big picture. And you have to make sure that when people get engaged in doing something, they know what the big picture is and they can evaluate whether or not their activities are part of the big picture. Which leads to the next one is creating a constancy of purpose. Now, it's been suggested by Dr. Edgman, our new Director of Research, we ought to change the way we say that, and I think we will on our next time we come out with a new model. We're going to say, create a unity of purpose. And I like that. I really do like that. That you get everybody unified around a common goal. Have any of you, there's a couple of companies that I think are just fabulous in this regard. Toyota is not as good as others and that I've seen. Have any of you ever visited Autoliv, an Autoliv facility? No? Okay, Autoliv is a main supplier of airbag units. They make airbag units. They've been blessed recently by having their major competitor have serious quality problems. And so their business is taking off very well right now. It's a Swedish-based company, but they have facilities all over the world, including 3 different plants near Utah State University in Utah. And so I get a chance to see them. They've won the Shingo Prize a couple of times. Their facilities in Utah have. Their Autoliv facility in China won the Shingo Prize a few years ago, and so on. They're a great company, at least the areas that have adopted the Toyota production system and the Shingo principles and so on. But they are the best I've ever seen at creating a unity of purpose. Every wall and every plant I've ever gone to in Autoliv, they have the purpose in a big banner up on the wall. It says, we save lives. You ask people, why are you doing that? And they say, well, why are you making this suggestion for improvement? They say, well, if we do this, then we can save more lives because. They put everything in terms of how do they save more lives? Because they're making a better airbag product. And it creates this wonderful, wonderful constancy of purpose. We don't do things that don't save lives. We only do things that save lives. We do them better. We can see if this will save more lives than this saves lives. And so they're constantly striving for that, to get better and better at that purpose. And everything they do is defined around that purpose. It's wonderful unity of purpose. Do you have that kind of unity of purpose in your organization? That's a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer. We don't. We're not that good. We're getting better at it, but we're still struggle. Okay, and the final thing is to create value for the customer or create value for the stakeholders if you want to expand the thought process a little bit. But you've got to have some results. Measurable results, effective results, results that impact people. What's the impact of what you're doing? So this is how we do the Shingo model now. And we've identified behaviors around that model. We've looked at systems and what kind of behavior the systems drive. We figured out a lot of the ideal behaviors that reflect that, and we judge people against those ideal behaviors, and we look at their system and say, well, your system's driving bad behavior here. You need to fix that. And that's the sort of thing we do when we do an examination visit. Any questions about the model? Are we good? Let's talk about NUMMI for a minute. Maybe we can talk about some systems. Who knows? I was going to show another video, but this one we got to see the video, so I'm not going to do it unless the guys figure out how to pull it up. Who knows what NUMMI is? Anybody want to volunteer to tell the NUMMI story?
I will.
Okay, Alex, you're on.
Is Matt here? From Zodiac, he should tell the story.
Are you Matt?
He was an employee.
Matt, were you an employee at NUMMI?
I co-opted there in 2004. You know, my daughter co-opted about the same time as you did.
Would you be willing to tell the part of the NUMMI story? Go for it. Yay, Matt.
Do I have to use the mic? Eric, you never told me I was going to be talking today. So NUMMI was a joint venture between Toyota and General Motors. You might think, why in the world would Toyota partner with General Motors? Well, if it sounds strange now, it was even stranger at the time, right? Well, they both had something to gain. Toyota was getting faced with embargoes and for pretty much their cars for importing. So they knew that they had to build in the U.S., right, to keep growing. And GM lost tons of money on, small fuel-efficient vehicles. And this is back in the 70s, right? NUMMI opened, I believe, in 81. So
I think it's 2, but we'll get there.
Okay, 82, sorry.
That's all right.
The Japanese had something to gain. They needed to learn how to work with U.S. labor. It's very different in Japan versus the U.S. So the Fremont plant was pretty much the worst GM plant in all of GM, right? They actually shut it down. It was a truck plant. There's a great This American Life podcast, if you're ever interested. It tells the whole story, and it was pretty much horrible. People felt enslaved to work there because of the union and everything. So GM actually, partnered with Toyota. Toyota partnered with GM, and they kept the same labor pool and the same union leadership, right? And they pretty much transformed that whole auto plant to a lean TPS facility. And what was remarkable was that the union was pretty much along with the whole ride. And that was pretty much Toyota's first steps into U.S. automaking and the very first and only union plant that they ever had. So if you go to Kentucky or Texas or Canada, the UAW is not there because they learned how to work with labor without needing the union. So that's what they had to gain.
Excellent job. So,
did I miss anything?
I think we got, you passed. I'll give you a good grade today. Good job. And that's a terrific explanation of what motivated GM and what motivated Toyota to do this joint venture, and also some of the results. We got the video working, I think, so why don't we show the video too, and it'll reinforce a lot of what Matt just told you. I hope. Yeah. This is a little bit of propaganda, though. This is NUMMI propaganda. I'm just warning you.
A groundbreaking agreement was struck between Toyota, General Motors, and the United Auto Workers. Together, they would join forces to breathe new life into a closed GM plant.
When we got here, there was nothing in the building. It was empty. You could see from one end of the plant to the other. This plant had been a GM plant before. It had closed its doors. The parking lots were empty. Weeds were going through the concrete. It was just unreal, unbelievable. And looking at all these columns and no machinery, no human life in the plant.
It's one of the most eerie feelings that I've ever had in my life. 5,000 people were working in here, and you see all of this machinery stopped. How marvelous it would be if we can bring this back to life. The entire company was firmly behind the coming together of these two great companies, GM and Toyota.
GM wanted to have first-hand knowledge of the Toyota production system.
I was determined to succeed at NUMMI, and I put all of my effort into the challenge.
You know, when you take two big companies and two different nations and two different parts of the world with two different cultures, two different manufacturing processes, how do you pull that together in a working team and a working relationship?
They asked the UAW to be part of that. It was going to be a new day. And those of us who were interested in coming back to work in this facility that we would have to come in with a new mind.
You really had to live it in your soul because it was a hard road.
It was going to be a relationship that was going to be built on mutual trust and respect.
NUMMI, using the Toyota production system, not only redefined how a car is put together, but also set a new standard for labor management relations, centered around 5 fundamental cornerstones.
There are many reasons for the success of the NUMMI, such as mutual trust and respect, and involvement, teamwork, safety, and equity.
トヨタ生産方式ではどうしても
Teamwork is an essential component of the Toyota production system.
Teamwork, definitely. It's one thing to look it up in the dictionary, it's another thing to have people really buy into it and understand it and absorb it and live it.
All of the people were involved in the decision making, in the line layout, in the job arrangement. It was totally different.
My pride in what I do is doing my job right the first time. If we see any problems, pull the cord, tell your group leader, your team leader. As long as we keep doing that, we'll be very successful for years to come.
The mutual trust and the respect is ongoing every day.
そのためには従業員同士とですね
Mutual trust and respect among team members.
ミューチュアルトラスト&リスペクトって言っておりましたですからね。
is also a key element of the Toyota production system.
Mutual trust and respect roll easy off the lips, and people have worked hard to make that a reality in this plant, and there's a lot of pride out there.
That's why I love NUMMI and the people that are in it.
Embracing the 5 cornerstones, the joint venture maintains a high level of success, evidenced by winning many prestigious J.D. Power Awards, producing over 5 million vehicles, and the construction of new stamping, plastics, and paint facilities.
The joint venture was extremely successful, and it became a case study that literally thousands and thousands of companies across the country realized that following some of these basic principles could make a huge difference in their success.
NUMMI revolutionized production built in North America. Quality all of a sudden became the top focus.
And the biggest winners out there are the people that are working on that line, making good wages, building a top quality car, keeping this plant alive.
It's been a win-win proposition all the way around. I tell the union, you won 5,000 something jobs back.
You walk out there now and there's people all over, cars running in the assembly line.
See the rebirth of the plant again. It's a terrific feeling. It's a great thing to be a part of it. It's a great thing just to have happened.
I've worked at other places and I've never felt the same kind of happiness that I do here.
One of the most important assets of the NUMMI is the people. Take care of those people is one of the most important heritage and history since NUMMI's operation started.
The only way that businesses stay in business today are when they work together as a team.
General Motors is a far better company today because of their experience and their relationship with Toyota. And the good thing is that Toyota's a greater company too, you understand.
In Japan, the 20th birthday is a special milestone. It celebrates the passage from childhood to mature adult. At NUMMI, it is much the same. This 20th anniversary represents the coming of age for NUMMI and its team members.
We should enjoy the celebration of the 20 years anniversary and also prepare next 20 years of quality and teamwork.
NUMMI number 1. All right.
NUMMI means quality.
NUMMI to me is pride.
NUMMI means teamwork.
It means opportunity.
Job security.
good benefits, and good pay.
Numi means family to me.
It's a great job.
Great cars and trucks. Quality innovation. 20 years of success for me and my family. Means taking real good care of my family. Numi is my life.
I work for a winning team.
Working with great people. Numi provides for me and my family. It's always been about the people.
Do you want to correct anything that they did in their propaganda video there?
They still have the problem.
Yeah, they still had their problems. They kind of sugarcoated a lot of things, but it was still a real workplace with real problems. And they hadn't solved everything, had they?
And they confronted them, right?
Yeah. So some of you may wonder what happened to Numi. Let's kind of go to what happened there. The partnership between GM and Toyota broke apart as they both felt they had accomplished their purpose in entering into the joint venture in the first place. And so the tension between the two became unbearable, and they decided to close the plant down together. Toyota had answered their question, which is, can the Toyota production system work in an environment outside of Japan? This was their first major investment outside of Japan. They put a little over $3 billion into Numi. But the answer to them was yes, and so they built the plant in Kentucky, where they build most of their cars that are sold in North America now. GM answered their question, and what their question was is, we want to steal everything we can from the Toyota production system and apply it in GM. And they decided they'd learned everything they wanted to learn, and so they kind of wanted to back out too. So what happened to Numi afterwards? They shut it down, and then, what's the rest of the story? Tesla.
GM used to finally catch on, right? They focused on the tools, they didn't get to the behavior.
Well, we're going to get back to that in a minute. Yeah, no, but hold that thought. Hold that thought, okay? So what happened to this wonderful workforce that had figured out how to do stuff? They build Teslas now because somebody jumped on that and said, look, we've got this wonderful workforce that is incredibly productive and engaged and everything else. I'm going to go have them build cars for me, it said Elon Musk. And so, when you have an asset like that, you can take it away when the partners dissolve it, but somebody's going to jump into the void and take advantage of this huge asset that's in place, which is what Tesla did. So, they keep a union, yeah, it's still a union, it's still working fine. So it's interesting, but the background, you got a flavor for the cultural diversity here, and that was incidentally deliberate on Toyota's part. They deliberately chose a GM plant where they knew there'd be people from all over the world, and all different kinds of people, not just white people or not just males and not just whatever. They wanted a very diverse work environment because they wanted to see how different people in a melting pot environment actually worked under the Toyota production system. Okay, now Gary Convis in the video mentioned a case study, right? I brought the case study with me today. I like going through cases like this and then evaluating it against the model. There we go. Put the model back up there. Did you hear anything in there that would reflect those principles? There was a lot there, wasn't there? Give me just one example. You can shout it out if you want. Respect, that was the very first thing they said. We are built on respect and teamwork, right? Did you get a sense that they respected their people? Did you get a sense that the people felt respected? Yes. It was great, wasn't it? Okay, what else did you get in there? Enterprise alignment around? Right, and they looked at it systemically, so they're thinking systemically, and they're saying we're all trying to accomplish things. We're trying to build the best cars in this class in the world. And they all kind of felt a pride about that. Numi is quality, right? They're talking about the not just the no defect type of quality, they're talking about creating value for the customer kind of quality, aren't they? And they took pride in that, and you could tell they were all kind of aligned around it. Now that could have been edited, and maybe not 100% of the people were aligned, and maybe they had some problems. But they did have a lot of alignment, didn't they? Okay, what else did you see in the video?
It went back to even resurrecting the plant,
Yeah.
creating jobs,
So,
affecting society.
okay, so the impact of the plant on families and the Bay Area economy and so on. There's lots of big picture alignment and thinking there. Incidentally, they hired back the union workforce that had worked at the GM plant before the plant was shut down. They had 2 criteria for not hiring somebody back. Do you know what those 2 criteria were? One was if they were a convicted felon, they were not hired back. And if they failed the drug test, they were not hired back. Those are the 2 things that they set as okay, we're going to take the workforce as is with 2 exceptions. They can't be a convicted felon and they can't be using drugs. I mean, how open can you be to say, okay, we're going to take everybody, and they did. Now, I'm going to go back to one of the points Matt was maybe getting at. How many people from the original set of workers and the original set of hirees the people they brought on board, how many of them stayed and how many of them washed out? You want to take a guess? 80% washed out. That's exactly right. You must have read the case. This is not for everybody. I can tell you, I would not be able to stand working in that environment. It's just not me. The pressure of attack time, I'm doing the same thing over and over, and then every once in a while getting a chance to experiment a little bit, that would drive me nuts. I'm not made to work on a production line. I'm sorry. It just won't work, and I would wash out. And, I don't think I'm incapable. I just think I don't want to go crazy. And, I mean, that's just one of the downsides of the Toyota production system. You've got to fit it. But if you fit it, you thrive. And you kind of get the feeling from the people, the ones that liked it, really liked it. And those that couldn't stand it left. But that's one of the things when you build a culture, and NUMMI is a great example of this. When you build a culture that is unified in purpose and you're all doing the same thing, you will drive out the people who don't belong. It's okay. Let them go find a place where they do belong. You'll drive out me and maybe I'll go find something worthwhile to do doing something else. That's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's part of the way we improve. Okay, so what else? Other thoughts on NUMMI? So now that I have the Shingo model and I'm the executive director of the Shingo Institute and I go examine companies against the model, I'm tainted because everything I read is tainted it goes through this filter of, how does that fit the model? Okay, so I asked that question, but I also went through the case study that Gary was talking about. This is the case study, professor at Stanford Business School. It's published in, the case study is available online through actually the case distributor for almost all business school cases is Harvard Business School Publishing. And so the Stanford Business School case is available on the Harvard Business School Publishing website if you want to go buy it. There's an irony there, I think. And I was a student at both schools, incidentally, so I can relate to the irony maybe better than others, but that's okay. So, some examples. Are they creating the right kinds of results? How do you think NUMMI's customer satisfaction compared to, so Toyota was still importing the same cars from their plant that's in Toyota City, the Tataoka plant. How do you think the quality of NUMMI compared to the quality or the customer satisfaction of customers that bought the car that was produced in Japan versus the quality of the car that was produced in Fremont, California? Nope, identical. Within a period of 5 to 8 years, in virtually every category, NUMMI matched the Japan plant. Isn't that stunning? How long did it take the plants in Toyota City to get to that level? 30 years. Why could NUMMI do it in 5 to 8 years? Well, this is a question we're going to go back to in just a minute. But why could NUMMI do it in 5 to 8 years and reach that same level of customer satisfaction and quality that took 30 years in Japan? What? Yeah, it always helps to follow and not lead in some cases. I think there's more to it than that, but we'll get back to that too. All right, so the results were outstanding. Customer satisfaction, the best in GM's network by far. Quality, the best in GM's network by far. The productivity, 40% higher than any other GM plant. Best in GM by far. So what does GM think about this? This is the time to chime in about GM.
Well, it goes back to your earlier point of there was a business case, right, for NUMMI. There was a business case that, you know, they didn't have jobs. This was an opportunity, right? So that was part of the whole learning curve, right, where the rest of GM didn't have that same business case or need to have that transformation. But GM, of course, wanted to do it. They said, go take pictures, make this plant, you know, the Van Nuys plant was in risk. They made like the Camaro and Firebird down in the LA Basin area. And they said, go take pictures and make the Van Nuys plant look like NUMMI. What do? They took pictures of tools, you know, and they tried to do it that way.
And GM has been really good at implementing the tools and the systems. Has GM been effective at implementing the culture? So GM, and I have not visited a GM plant lately, and so I might be speaking out of turn here, but if you look at the results, GM follows kind of the Shingo Prize winners that would hit a certain level of productivity and results and then couldn't sustain it because they didn't implement the culture. They didn't go through the cultural change.
It's that there was a distinct difference between the behavior of Japanese management and the behavior of GM management.
So one of the guys that bought into it was a line leader. He actually went initially to NUMMI. He was already a manager level person, and he got in as a, and the case study is about his experience as a line operator. And his name is Jamie Resco. I don't know if any of you know him or not, but the case study is built around his experience where he negotiated to come in as a line operator, and he wanted to learn about the process. And Jamie ended up becoming the director of quality for all of GM, but then because his philosophy disagreed with the corporate philosophy, he ended up leaving a few years ago. And it's unfortunate because he's one of them that I think within GM who got it, and others don't get it, and when you clash against the command and control structure of GM, which has not changed so much in the last 100 years or so, since Alfred Sloan decided that command and control is the way to do it, that culture is so impenetrable that he just couldn't take it anymore. And so he opted out of the GM culture in favor of going and finding some place where you can be engaged and show respect for people and do all the things that he experienced at NUMMI. But the case study is his reflections on entering in as an operator. And some of the fun things he did is he tested the system. He passed bad products down the line, knowingly, just to see what would happen. And guess what happened? Who was it I was talking to? Wasn't it you? No? Somebody over here that we were talking about. What happens if you pass bad product down the line? Yeah, they came back and said, no, you can't do this to me. He decided to come in late. And he tried it a couple of days in a row. And then it wasn't his supervisor that pulled him aside. It was the team members that pulled him aside and said, look, we'll cover for you if you really got a serious problem. But if you're going to be gone like this, we're going to vote you off the team and you'll be fired. It's self-enforcing. It doesn't need anybody to oversee it. You don't even need the supervisor to be worrying about it all that much because the team members will get on your case. So he writes about all of that in the case study. But it's a self-enforcing culture of excellence. And I love that aspect of it. And you don't get that in a command and control. Yes, sir.
So you said that 80% of the old workers didn't end up staying in the plant and only 20% did. So in the case study, did they examine the change in employees as part of the thing? Because they brought in a different culture of employees that would embrace the newer way of doing it, which is not what's happening in the other plants and why they can't sustain it because the culture of the employees.
The culture of the employees drove out those who weren't willing to perform at that level or meet the requirements of the job. Let me just kind of read an example of the kind of training that everybody went through, though. This is the new, the union employees that were coming back, and then every new employee, they went through this training. And this is from the viewpoint of Jeremy Resco. I was amazed at all the levels of testing and educational training that they provide new recruits. The initial training and orientation program takes 3 months, so I only got the short version. The formal training is 30 days and includes instruction about the Toyota production system, how the suggestion system operates, the importance of standardized work processes, scrolling, welding, the team process, and lots of discussion of the importance of having the right attitude. But 3 months of investment in somebody's training is like something he'd never thought of before. Because, all you need to do is tighten, go back to the Henry Ford, all you got to do is be able to tighten that one bolt right there. That's not what they want you to do. They want you to be engaged and understand the whole picture and understand how you fit into it and be able to do multiple jobs within that and understand, how do you become a good teammate and how do you...
Part of the success is the fact that they weeded out the bad and only kept the good employees.
Well, and I would have been one of, I hesitate to use good and bad as much as those who fit and those who don't fit, because I would have been weeded out because it would have driven me nuts.
Yeah.
But
you're not the right employee.
I'm not the right employee, but it's a way of weeding out the employees that don't fit. And that doesn't mean anybody's necessarily bad. That just means they don't fit. And I think as leaders, we need to think about that. In our environment, who fits and who doesn't fit. And if somebody doesn't fit, it's not a reflection on them so much as there is a certain culture and you've got to buy into the culture and fit with the culture in order to make it work. Other question. So, as one of the things I've done is I went through the case study and identified the principles and how NUMMI applied them. And I found an example of every single principle and every single dimension, and how NUMMI went about applying every single principle and every single dimension. Were they perfect in doing that? Nobody is. That's the point. So we see great companies all the time, the best in the world. They apply for the Shingo Prize. We get to go visit them. Have we ever seen a perfect company? No, that's why I don't say seek perfection. Seek excellence, because everybody can get better. So let's go back to the question about why did NUMMI, now I have the perspective of having run a plant in Japan and working with Japanese employees and then doing the same a few times in the US. And so I'll share with you another perspective besides the experience that goes along with 30 years of trial and error. Now you know a lot of things that work and a lot of things that don't work, and so you don't need to keep repeating those same mistakes. So it's shorter if you're following the leader, so to speak, and you can make progress a lot faster if you're willing to learn from somebody else. And there was certainly an element of that in NUMMI. They took 400 line leader positions and sent them over to Japan for a month to actually work on the lines in Toyota, to learn the Toyota production system firsthand, which is a great training. They spent $1 million training those line leaders. That's how much their foray into Japan cost, just to have them pick up what they already knew at the time about the Toyota production system. But, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about Japanese school system. For all the great things they're able to do and have wonderful math scores, and every student that graduates from high school has to go at least through calculus. Believe it or not, you have to finish calculus before you can graduate from high school. For all the wonderful things they do in math and science, they still suck in certain areas. And we suck in our own areas in the American educational system, but there's some areas where we're way better than they are. And there's a proverb in Japan that the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. And you see that, I go visit the English classes in Japanese high schools, and it is so much that case, that if you dare say anything, they just hammer you down. And students are just expecting the professor or the teacher to have all of the answers, and so they just sit there and listen, and they take notes, and they listen and take notes, and they listen and take notes. Now, switch that kind of mentality to a production environment. I'm sitting in a conference room with a group of people in the plant trying to solve a problem. And I say, let's do some brainstorming here. What are some ideas about what's causing this problem, or how can we make it better? Dead silence. What do you think? You even ask on specific people. Carlos, what do you think about this idea? Because the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. And I'll tell you, trying to extract ideas from Japanese employees was really, 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 really hard. And when they actually would venture out a little bit and suggest, it was always good quality stuff. And when you broke the ice, it got a little bit better, and other people would start chiming in too, but it was really, breaking through the ice was hard. And it didn't matter. So I'd sit in those same meetings and see how other people did. I thought, maybe this is just me. Nope. It doesn't matter who was leading the discussion and trying to get brainstorming. It was hard to extract ideas from Japanese employees. Never had that problem running a plant in the States. I'm just telling you. Sometimes you get overwhelmed with the number of ideas, and some of them are really good ideas, and some of them are not so good ideas. But you have to be kind to those people who have not so good ideas by saying, well, what do you think are some of the challenges with that? You know, and helping them understand why that's not the best idea in the world. But never had a problem at all soliciting engagement from the employees. And I think that's what Toyota experienced at NUMMI. They saw people engaged because they want to be engaged, and they know how to be engaged because we're actually pretty good in the American school system about engaging students in the learning process. We actually ask questions and make them think. We ask them, if we teach them a foreign language, instead of memorizing the definition of this word in another language, we actually get them to try to speak in that language. Amazing, isn't it? So we engage students a lot better in our school system than the Japanese do, and it helps us when we want to do this kind of engagement. So I think that's a factor at NUMMI, and I think that's what Toyota has experienced in their other facilities as well. Not only does the Toyota production system work, in some ways, it works better. That's our advantage here. We can make it work better. We can compete against the very best in the world if we actually use the right systems and methodology and thinking and drive the ideal behavior. We can be better than the Japanese at doing what they do really, really well. But we got to have the right thought process and the right kind of engagement and drive the right kind of behaviors. Americans are also a little harder to control.
I don't want it.
You don't want it?
No, I say that's what you get. I don't want it. I don't care if it's good. I don't want it.
Yeah.
Sure I do.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Exactly. Okay. All right. We've got about 5 minutes, so let's open it up for maybe just general questions. I wanted to make sure you got a couple of things. One is an introduction to the model, to the concept of ideal behaviors, to the idea that systems that we design as leaders drive those ideal behaviors, and we're the ones that are responsible for designing those systems. I wanted you to understand that we can do this. This is not a Japanese concept. It's a universal and timeless. This will work 100 years from now as well as it works now. It'll work anywhere in the world, and I've seen it in many places throughout the world work really, really well. So it's timeless and universal, and I'm borrowing from my friend Stephen Covey again on that one. I'm borrowing his when it comes to principles, timeless and universal, and it works. It works, it really does. Questions? Yes, sir. He's going to pass a mic down to you, so.
Just an observation. I think this would have been fantastic as a delighter. You know, if the model itself, looking at the model, looking at Tsumi, but I think they had their corporate agendas.
Yes.
You know, as you said, you know, Japanese had their agenda, GM had their agendas, UAW had their agendas.
And they merged for a while, and they parted again.
In that little clip we saw, I saw different hats, different names. Mm-hmm. They weren't really one badge. You know, that's because, you know, they did have the enterprise alignment, but I wish it could have worked
But it
further.
was temporary.
Yeah.
And it was for strategic reasons that it was temporary. Just think what you can do in your organization that doesn't have to be temporary. I work in an organization that luckily is not temporary. It's been around since 1882. I'm pretty sure it'll be around another 150 years from now too. Universities tend to have a lot of longevity, especially if you run them well. But, so I can think in terms of the mission and not have to be encumbered as long as I figure out a way to make it sustainable, both financially and in terms of the mission. So, I've worked 30 years in industry, and I worked primarily for 3 different companies. One of those companies did not make it. That's because the product didn't work. I was sad. We had a great culture. We were doing some great things. It just didn't work in the environment it needed to work in. So, but not everything is sustainable because not everything works. But in this case, you can build one that is sustainable. And that's kind of the point I want. What's the difference between good results and good results over a long period of time? Culture. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So I was just curious if there were any of the Shingo principles or systems that have been implemented at Utah State, either by yourself or by somebody else.
So we actually made a concerted effort within the business school to apply some of these principles. And I'm just going to give you a quick snapshot of one aspect of it, okay? And that is, and I'm going to put it in a lean term, what is the value stream of higher education? Okay, I'll answer that for you. In a typical higher education environment, there are 2 value streams, and they are defined in every single faculty member's work statement, or role statement is the universal term they use. You teach, or in other words, the value is education that you provide to students, and you do research. And the customers that you would then appeal to are the academy, your peers in your field who judge your research as written in a journal article and published within an academic journal. Okay, so there's 2 value streams. One I would call education, and one I would call research. The customers of education are the students who pay their tuition to buy that education from you, and the peers are the ones who judge your research. Okay? That's wrong. To us, if we teach some student something that they pay money for, that's fine, but if it doesn't get them a job, it's a waste. They've wasted their money, we've wasted our time, we've wasted their time. What is the real customer? The customer is the company that hires that student and gives them a good job and helps them advance their careers. And they come to us, the students don't come to us to get an education, they come to us to get a career. And so we've got to change our thought process, and we did. We changed our thought process to say, the customer is industry, the students are our products. We've got to figure out how to place them in industry and advance their careers. So we changed our purpose statement to say, our purpose at the John M. Huntsman School of Business, our purpose is to be a career accelerator for our students. And we evaluate everything we do against that. This is a revolutionary thought in higher education, but that's where we started from. And then you can that was our biggest rock in the reservoir. As we started looking at, what do we need to tackle first? We need to get our purpose straight. And we didn't have it straight. And it's not aligned with the university at all, because the university is all about this wonderful thing about education is this, all this stuff. No, ours is just really simple. Help advance the careers of our students. It's not this grandiose, vague thing out there. Okay, does that kind of give you an idea? You can do this in any kind of an environment, even education. Anything that it's even been around for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and is lockstep into a very fixed culture, you can change that culture. The timekeeper is taking over, but I have one more announcement. Can I take just a second?
You can take one more second. You got your lavalier on. I'm crippled.
Oh, that's right. Okay. You won't let me take that away from you, huh? All right, so just real quick, I want to invite you to come to our Shingo conference in April in Washington, D.C. There's a poster there. I have some flyers if you want to take it with you. You are welcome to come take copies of the Shingo model book with you if you would like. And I also put up a stack of business cards here. If you want to get in touch with me later, feel free to take one and shoot me an email or something like that later. But that's all I have. Thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Eric.
Ken, thank you.